This has happened before. Miners will go in and try to scare the wits out of villagers by pretending to look like aliens, etc.
The whole thing is weird, okay? So let's try to unpack this a little bit. The events, a lot of the events that are being reported are true. We have video of the authorities showing up. We have video of the villagers running out into the jungle shooting at something, okay? But after the investigation, what they come out with is they say that the prosecutor says that they believe the police investigation summarizes that these were miners protecting gold, okay, with jetpacks, that they're flying around on jetpacks with hoods and masks and glowing something and going around cutting people's throats. So let that sit just for a second. It really sounds like an episode of Scooby-Doo where, you know, Mr. Withers puts on a goblin mask and is trying to protect his gold. It is almost as far-fetched as the fact that the villagers believe these are 7-foot aliens.
Well, case closed. Pack it up, people. Show's over. Nothing left to investigate. Thanks for watching. Blah, blah, blah.
You know, it's funny. Out of all the stories I've looked into, I've never seen one swept under the rug so quickly. Because the moment the Peruvian Navy concluded that it was not aliens, but illegal gold miners behind the face peeler debacle, pundits like this echoed the sentiment and the entire case died. And if you try to find more information on this case online, you'll come across a shoddy article here and there and a couple YouTube videos from small creators such as myself. And that's about it. Any and all video evidence of villagers firing upon unknown beings, or people running for their lives in the woods at night, have all vanished. It's almost as if this story never happened. Or perhaps that's what they want you to believe, because reliable sources confirm that these harrowing encounters did not only occur, but are still going on to this very day. That's right, unknown beings, the face peelers, locally known as Las Pelacaras, silently float into small villages of Peru in the dead of night, and allegedly peel the faces off their victims. Why they do this is unknown. There are some theories, all of which I'll get into later, so be sure to stick around. But one thing we do know is that they use technology far beyond our comprehension. These beings allegedly stand over 7 feet tall. They float silently on objects reported to resemble floating discs, and they wear what appears to be impenetrable armor. The locals believe this because despite their best efforts, they can't seem to harm whatever these creatures are. Villagers have claimed their bullets bounce right off of them, and even traps armed with shotgun shells don't seem to slow them down. In fact, they don't seem to harm them at all, because when the traps are set off, only mysterious footprints remain with no blood. It's almost impossible to make sense of, like it's straight out of some sci-fi movie. That's where illegal gold miners using jetpacks came from. If it sounds ridiculous to you, it's because it is. We don't know what we're dealing with, so humans did what humans do best, and rationalized the phenomenon the best way they could. But it's time we give this scary story a closer look, and retell the harrowing account of a young girl named Talia in a small village west of Iquitos, who not only saw these beings up close, but nearly had her face peeled off by them. Life is simpler for the Iquitos people, a tribe of less than 1,000 men and women settled on the wet outskirts of Iquitos in Peru. Here, you'll find no restaurants or lavish hotels, just the modest huts and homes of those that inhabit the region. And if you're ever hungry, you must look to the dense jungle and waters beyond to provide, which is exactly what 15-year-old Talia was doing on this particular night. Nestled in her backyard stood a lush tree of tangerines, Talia's favorite late-night snack. She grasped a long stick and reached it high, knocking the fruit from the tree and catching them as they fell, an act she's done almost every night of her life. But as she continued to pick more fruit, an unsettling shift in the air occurred. A silent gust of wind brushed at her back, and a feeling of uneasiness overcame her all of a sudden. Talia hurried as she picked the last of her tangerines off the ground, but before she could fill her basket and bring them inside, a large hand suddenly covered her mouth. In a panic, Talia struggled to scream for help, but was quickly wrestled to the ground. She frantically looked around to see who was behind this attack, and what she saw would end up scarring her for the rest of her life. Towering above Talia stood two large beings with harrowing green eyes, looking down at her, dressed in a mysterious metallic armor. They dragged her by her hands and feet behind a hut in her yard. One held her down firmly as the other took out a mysterious powder and cream, along with a syringe. Talia was petrified at what they were going to do to her. She struggled and tried to free herself, but it was no use. One of these beings then rubbed the powder all over her face, which immediately made it go numb. At this moment, the beings spoke to one another in what sounded like Spanish, and, horrifically, Talia was able to make out what they were saying.
"Careful, don't put too much,"
one chillingly said.
"It'll ruin the flesh."
Then, Talia could only watch in horror as a nasal syringe was shoved in her nose, injecting the unknown cream into her nostrils. Then, the being standing above her pulled out what appeared to be a laser scalpel and turned it on. Talia laid helplessly as the being made an incision at the top of her neck, attempting to peel her face off. But Talia wasn't going to go without a fight. She struggled, desperately trying to break free and scream. The entity making the cut stopped for a moment and slapped her across the face, urging her to stay still. Luckily, this brutal gesture gave her just enough time to call for help. They fought to restrain her, but the damage was done. Talia's father and siblings called out to her, quickly running to the backyard, only to see the beings hop onto their mysterious platforms and effortlessly fly away into the night. They found Talia bloodied, barely clinging to life. The aftermath is exactly what you'd expect. A giant media circus followed by investigations launched by Peru's Navy and National Prosecutor's Office. And both would end up finding more questions than answers, like the lack of photo and video evidence. But how do you take reliable pictures of something that only comes out at night? Beings with metallic armor void of all color. Locals compared it to trying to capture shadows. The only thing they could make out of them were the color of their eyes, along with the lights at the base of their supposed hoverboards. In addition to Talia's family and neighbors witnessing the assailants flee, dozens of Iquitos also reported sightings throughout the year, with Talia being just one of the many victims. The entire village became traumatized and on high alert. Patrols were conducted by locals 24/7, and entire families would crowd into one home to keep each other company during the long nights. Trees surrounding the village were chopped down to give locals better line of sight, and traps armed with buckshot pellets were placed around the surrounding areas. Locals claim they hear the traps going off in the night, only to check them in the morning to find nothing. For comparison, a young girl accidentally set off one of these traps, and both her legs were nearly blown off. Despite this, the Iquitos' opinions on who they are dealing with seems to vary. They're unsure if they're aliens, humans, or even some kind of super soldiers. But one thing they agree on is that someone, or something, is tormenting their village, and none of them are sure as to why. One witness claimed he saw one leap over an entire tree, and others claim to have found footprints near traps that defy all logic, like being twice the size of a human footprint while being a mysteriously oblong shape. Obviously, those investigating didn't know what to do with all this information. It was later determined that illegal gold miners wearing jetpacks were behind the whole thing, but this conclusion felt like a slap in the face to the Iquitos. The tribe begged for more help and supplies, stating that the danger was still out there, continually terrorizing the village in the night. However, politicians didn't seem to care much about the outcry, stating that the Iquitos are an overly superstitious people, and considered the case closed. And once it was concluded that it was merely gold miners on jetpacks behind the attacks, the media abandoned the story and the Iquitos were left to fend for themselves. But luckily for them, this wouldn't last that long. A paranormal researcher and explorer by the name of Timothy Alberino ventured to Peru alongside his friend Doug Thornton to see if they could gather more information themselves. And what they found appalled them. Upon their arrival to the village, Tim and company were met with men armed with rifles and shotguns, and no matter the time of day, the men remained armed. They ranged from young boys to old men, many of which were trembling, continually looking over their shoulders throughout the day. There was clearly no sense of gun safety or training, with many of the guns in terrible condition. It was a miracle they could shoot at all.
Rusted. The brake action is fabricated. I'm not even sure how well these will fire. These weapons are not very well maintained or taken care of. And for anyone coming here to hurt these people, this is the perfect people. They have almost no defense. You might as well throw rocks.
So, Tim and Doug took it upon themselves to help train and equip the Iquitos to better defend themselves. And despite not being able to capture evidence of the phenomena on camera, a lot of good still came from this expedition. Not only did patrols become more efficient, but the Iquitos were given night vision goggles, radios, and other high-end gear to help them in their fight against the unknown. But it wasn't just the physical materials that Tim provided that helped the Iquitos, but also the mental, the peace of mind that they were being heard. Tim recounts that almost everyone in the village had an experience to share, and the fact that they were documented gave them the reassurance that they weren't alone. One man even claimed to have seen a glowing acorn-shaped orb over the river one night while he was fishing. Or was it an egg-shaped orb? Perhaps I shouldn't go out of my way to connect dots, but I'll leave that to you. And of course, there was Talia, who could barely even look the two gentlemen in the eye when retelling her story. And honestly, can you blame her? Not only was she diagnosed with PTSD, but she has to endure the chilling possibility her assailants are still out there and can return at any time. So, this raises an important question. Who really are these assailants? Well, Doug, who toured in Afghanistan, has seen firsthand what the United States military is capable of. And based off what the villagers have told them, it's apparent that whoever's behind all this is in possession of technology way beyond what even the military possesses. I mean, we're talking state-of-the-art weaponry, advanced propulsion systems, and exosuits straight out of a Marvel movie. You'd have to have some serious cash and connections to even sniff anything in the stratosphere. So what about these gold miners? Could they actually be behind all this? Well, let's take a closer look. Illegal gold mining is big business in Peru, and I mean big. Illegal gold mining alone is estimated to generate billions of dollars annually, with reports indicating that it accounts for over 20% of the nation's total gold output. As you'd imagine, a business like this takes a massive operation. Tens of thousands of Peruvians are estimated to work in illegal gold mining throughout the country, and that doesn't just include the miners themselves. There are various support networks that facilitate the operations, like the suppliers of both equipment and chemicals used to extract the gold, transportation networks to move it, and of course, buyers who help sell the gold on the black market. However, there is a caveat to all of this. There's no evidence of any advanced technology used by illegal gold miners, especially not jetpacks or hoverboards. In fact, I could only find evidence of the most basic of equipment being used: dredges, pumps, excavators, shovels, pans, and slice boxes. The only thing I did find out of the ordinary was the use of mercury and cyanide, which is now more than ever polluting this beautiful country. Illegal gold mining leaves a devastating trace, and yet these face peelers leave little to no evidence of their existence, except to those who witnessed them up close. And despite their best efforts, Tim and Doug left their expedition empty-handed, failing to capture even a lick of evidence of the phenomenon despite all their resources. And yet, there's an obvious reason for all of this. Tim had previously stated that they wanted to go in covertly, to not make a fuss in hopes of bettering their chances of seeing these things up close. Of course, like many things in life, that didn't go as planned because upon their arrival, the Iquitos held a very public celebration. I wouldn't blame anyone for this, mainly because we're talking about a tribe of people who rarely see visitors. And if you want to see more about Tim and Doug's expedition to San Antonio de Pintuyacu, you can find the link to the video in the description. It's about 2 hours long, but it's an interesting watch. And after this insightful journey, Tim and Doug came to the conclusion that there are obvious knowns and unknowns about this phenomena. They put it simply like this: what they know. First, this is not the work of narcos or miners. Initially, the two believed it was, in fact, miners, but changed their mind due to the opposition's advanced technology and tactics. Secondly, they don't believe there are any jetpacks involved. If anything, they say it's more likely the assailants are using some sort of advanced technology and propulsion, perhaps even alien reversed engineered technology. It sounds bizarre, but so are their capabilities. We're dealing with something completely unknown here. Next, they do actually peel faces. There are videos and evidence of both men and women having their faces removed. Why they do this, though, is unknown. Moreover, this is not mass hysteria or psychosis. Tim and Doug firmly believe the Iquitos are telling the truth of their experiences. Lastly, they know that the Navy did not truly investigate. Investigators could not find the root of the assailants, so they blamed jetpacking gold miners to save face. Now, for what they don't know. To start, they don't know whether it's humans or aliens behind all this. Maybe it could be both. In terms of Talia's story, the assailants were unusually tall, but they sounded rather human in their speech. It's hard to make 2 cents of who could be behind this. Perhaps we are dealing with something we don't fully understand. But like Tim suggested previously, it's possibly humans using reverse engineered technology. And yet, there's no way to be sure. Secondly, the motive is unknown. We don't know why they are trying to do this. Are they merely imitating the face peelers? Or are they the face peelers? And, of course, this brings us to the face peeling itself. Why? Are they organ trafficking, sex trafficking, or, chillingly, are they using the faces to appear more human, stealing the identities of those who have had their faces removed? That's a little too scary to think about. Let me know what you think down below in the comments. After all, your guess is as good as mine. However, there is one thing I left out in the what they know category. It's that Tim and Doug believe the phenomena to be real, that there are in fact entities floating in the trees in the dead of night, hoping to claim another victim. Now, I only have their words to go by since I've never been to Peru. Perhaps I'll garnish the following and the finances to do that one day, but for now, I'll defer to those that have actually been there. You know what? I'll actually just go out and say it. If this video gets 1 million views and 100,000 likes, I'll lead my own expedition to San Antonio de Pintuyacu and try to see for myself. Because I'm starting to believe there is something out there. That there is something unknown lurking in the darkness, preying on the poor Iquitos. My heart is with them, but I'm not exactly eager to go out there. Maybe it's best to look at this case from afar, and if you ever do find yourself in a small village near Iquitos, I'd stay inside at night if I were you. Because if you don't, there's a chance the last thing you ever see is your own face looking right back at you. Thanks for watching, and good night.